Is Chong Li the current champ?
He's never been defeated. Holds all sort of records, including the fastest KO. He killed a guy during the last Kumite.
Yep. Kicked the poor bastard right in the throat. I died right there on the platform. Chong Li stood there and watched him die.
Hey!
This is very exciting. For the first time on the channel, I have Jesse Snider. He's worked in the music industry. He's been a comic book writer. He's a big fan of comic books. He wanted to come on and just talk about some nerd stuff. So welcome to the channel for the very first time, Jesse. How you doing?
How's it going, man? I'm so happy to be here. I am a huge fan of your channel. I really just, I've been really bummed out about the conversation about comic books for a long time. And when I stumbled upon your channel, I was just really grateful how, I think, reasonable and neutral and fair. And, and like me, you try not to get in the middle of it and take sides, but you have opinions here, there about things. And I so really appreciate a, organization, just speaking from a place of love, but critically and trying to, help maybe guide the industry. I think people like Doomcock and the Critical Drinker are helping Star Wars course correct. Of course, after they fired Gina Carano, it might be a little bit craziness going on over there. But, we really need to find our way back to a loving conversation. I realized that on social media, I'd gotten caught up in how ugly the conversation has become, just in the fact that that's what everybody's talking about. So I was always just kind of talking about what they were talking about. And last week I was just like, you know what, screw this, man. I'm just going to start sharing all the funny videos that I've found and sharing stupid little things that I think are great, or movies that I love, because I want to have a conversation with people from that place. I don't want to have a conversation with people from this other place. And, the real tragedy of, music, comic books, so many things right now is that we're living in a very different world where the 24-hour Twitter feed of your favorite writer or sports star is open. That wasn't the case. Even 15 years ago, it wasn't quite what it is now, and stories were being written and nobody could sit there and go, Chuck Dixon is a Republican, and I never noticed. And I don't think that Chuck writes like that. I think that Chuck's a great writer. And it's, kind of when you hear little rumblings that sort of DC is essentially not hiring Chuck Dixon because he's a Republican. He's not a loud Republican. He's not a jerky Republican. He's not he's really a pretty sweet ass Republican as far as I'm concerned. And his writing is balanced. He writes for the characters. He's always been a great journeyman writer. I've been so devastated that something like that might really be stopping me from reading stories from him, because I just talk about somebody who I always would show up for. I know a lot of people feel like that about Chris Claremont. I don't really feel like that about Chris Claremont, but you do. Well, that's good. And in recent Chris Claremont, that's what I mean. I can't. But recent Chuck Dixon, I think Chuck Dixon still got it. He never lost. He never lost his touch. And just all of a sudden he wasn't really writing as much. And this thing where, so I wanted to come on here because, you guys have had so many conversations that I've wanted to get in on. Maybe we'll touch on some things after we get through the bulk of it. But this is really about Daredevil, because you were having a conversation about why Daredevil is been able to be such a consistently great title for Marvel for so long. And I really know the answer. And as I was sort of coming to it, because the question hadn't been posed to me, but as I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, I see. And it really showed me a lot of things, because so there's this shift that happened in comics, I guess in the 90s or whatever, when we got the Marvel Knights and Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti came in. I love those guys, both separately, and they're such wonderful people. Joe really, I think, really tries his best and does his thing. And I think Jimmy, oh, what a wonderful guy Jimmy is. Love Jimmy Palmiotti. But some things began at that time, which are inadvertent, but they also are a part of sort of the cancer that has been affecting things. As that marquee of Joe Quesada doing Daredevil, that became the new book at Marvel as Daredevil continued to move. People knew on some level that Joe was watching that book, cared about that book. That was the book that he came back into the scene and began to take over. I mean, not that he ever left the scene, but came back into the Marvel scene and to take over their thing. And why has it been so good? Because writers have been paying attention to what's going on in the book. Because everybody, this is a job for most people. It's really heartbreaking. It kills me. The reason why certain Muppet things are a problem when I was dealing with licensors, the people I was dealing with, they weren't the right people to be talking about this stuff. Because when somebody says, hey, does anybody want a job working for the Muppets at Disney in a big room full of people? Everybody's like, yes, I want a promotion. Everybody wants a promotion. When I got hired by Aaron Sparrow at Boom Studios when I went over to pitch the Muppets, and I didn't get hired for the Muppets immediately, but Aaron had expressed to me that, and by the way, one of the friends of the channel, Aaron Sparrow, is one of my best friends, which I didn't know about the channel through him. It was completely so funny. Like I literally was listening to one of the interviews, and he came on, and I was like, "Hey, Aaron, you were on this channel that I was watching." It was very funny, but Aaron, had said to me, everybody was at him, at the convention he was at. He said he was really tired, and everybody was just sort of like, I want work, I want work, I want work. At least that was the energy. And my energy when I came over, I was just like, I love the Muppets, and I see them get not treated right. And I really would love to make sure that they are. And he just was, well, that's the energy we'd like, really, I want somebody who really cares and is going to put care into this. I will not name the writer, but a very big writer. I was out to dinner with him and his family and my family, and I literally didn't go back out with him ever again because he said this, because this is how much this means to me. He said that he does a draft and then he looks at his page rate, and depending on how much he's getting paid, he either is done or he'll do some more drafts. And I had just finished 9 drafts of Evil Ernie #1 because first issue is really hard to get right. And Brian Bolito is a friend of mine, and I really was just trying to do a good job. And I 9 drafts, and he's like, "Yeah, 1 draft. Then we see how much we get paid." I'm like, "You do what is necessary, or you do nothing." I literally was like, "I have lost all respect for you." And he's a pretty big deal writer. But this is a lot of the thought process. It's there in music. I was there's so many people who they're trying to get money out of their collaborators, and everything's a business. It's like, if you really love it, you do it because you love it. But at the same time, and this is to be fair, the industries that recognize that the people who want to work in them want to work in them, they have really made it hard for us. So the people who are more enterprising or whatever, they really, they need to churn and they need to get their stuff out. But somebody like me who, when I decided I was going to be a comic book writer, I just started studying. I just read every single thing I could get my hands on, and just everything major that I'd ever heard about. I asked anybody, what's important? What should I read? I just read and read and read and read. And I really never stopped reading. Because at a certain point, I recognized that, wow, I could really be useful to this damn industry if I was the one person reading everything, because it's apparent to me that not everybody is fucking reading everything. And that's why so much of this shit is shit. I'm like, fuck, man. I'm like, just have one guy reading everything and listen to him a little bit. Because as I was dealing with editors, I was like, they're not reading everything, and this is really fucking me up because I am, and I'm trying to freaking build, and you're not realizing why this is so good.
I've been building for this for 3 issues, man. This is the payoff. How did you not see it?
It's crazy. It's crazy. But Daredevil, it really, it granted, Frank Miller already had his fingerprints all over that. There's wonderful fingerprints all over Daredevil, even though Daredevil was a little bit of a struggle starting out on a sales front, but it's the most kind of respectable title, probably because it hasn't been around long enough to be really embarrassing, like early Batman, but it's just as, and it's also a real great middle line too, with so many of these writers and so many of these people, because he's not your traditional superhero. He's his own little interesting thing, and they're paying attention, and really good ideas have been thrown at him over and over and over again, because he is the marquee. And on some level, Joe really cares about Daredevil and has really cared about Daredevil. And that has created an industry where the people who are wanting jobs and are, well, what's the one thing I can think? I should read Daredevil.
Absolutely. He's been so consistent. One of the things I also think that one of the keys to success for Daredevil over the years is pretty much whenever a writer is done with that character, they take the toy, they put him back the way he was, they put him back in the box, and then they step away. So when the next writer gets in there, there's not a whole lot hanging over the character, and they get to start with him from fresh. Whereas you never really seen anyone do that with Batman. He just his mythos just gets bigger and bigger. He gets more gadgets and gadgets. Whereas Daredevil always kind of gets brought back down to his original size. I think that helps out where you get to kind of do your story with the character.
Yeah, I've thought that as well with, some of these things that they do, they get kind of unwieldy. But, I got to say the first, because really I stopped reading, because I had a big, section of time where I wasn't really reading anything. I was just had a family and I was trying to make money, and I basically felt guilty to be spending money on comic books and toys, and I went cold. Yeah, I went cold turkey for a while, just like kind of for my family, in the name of my family. But I really realized that I was making myself miserable. I love comic books, and so now I've come back and I read just kind of a couple books a week. But I have not read some of the more modern takes on Daredevil, which I've heard really great things about. I'm excited to read some of them. I stopped after Shadowland approximately, which was awful. But prior to Shadowland, there was this really pretty unwieldy story, as one writer after another, they were tag teaming and they were obviously reading each other's work, and it was great. And we have problems with something like Kamala Khan and all these things, because a lot of these writers feel like they're rivals. So it's all right, you're the next on the Kamala Khan series. Are you going to honor your rival's writing voice? Because it's the original writing voice that takes on the acting performance of the character. And now the next writer who comes in has to match the voice.
But for there to be legitimate character continuity, yes, it needs to sound and act like the same character.
But they don't do that because it's not the same situation anymore. We really have an interesting, the art industry is so interesting. It really is. Music and comic books have always been my passion. Music, I've always kind of done all my music independently and stayed out of the business because I didn't like the business side. But comic books, I have been in this business, in it, for I guess 2 decades now. Since I was little, since I was 16, going to busing it to the Chicago Comic-Con to harass Erik Larsen about Savage Dragon, because I'm a huge Savage Dragon fan. And I really credit him a lot to why I love the medium so much, because he loves the medium. And I would read his letters column, and I would just, all the things he would say and the way he would talk about it, he just totally romanced me. And then I had a job at 7-Eleven, and I started reading Deadpool and some of the books on the shelf, and I saw the advertisements for Marvel Knights. And that's really where I got in, even though my dad got me a subscription to Spider-Man when I was little. But I never read that stuff, for the most part. Savage Dragon was the one book. And, the beginnings of comics come from this place of a bunch of adults doing something that they didn't really expect to be doing. They were just, I draw these comic books, I write these comic books, and then this audience of people who love them starting to swell up from underneath, and a new world, a renaissance of so much of the comics and things that we got from, '70s, they're really because of these people who were paying attention, who then came out to write stories that were lovingly paying attention to previous stories that the other people were also paying attention to. And, the best runs in comics are based on somebody's love for, you were talking about that apparently, I haven't read the Conan, but then you said that Jerry Dugan's Conan's great because he loves it. He loves Conan. That's what
he writes a damn good Conan. Absolutely.
And that's the thing, and maybe I didn't love Toy Story as much as I love the Christmas toy, which Jim Henson's company produced. But I appreciated Toy Story. And when Aaron offered me the job, I watched those movies over and over and over and over and over. They were just playing in the background as I was writing the scripts because I wanted my voice of all the characters to just be perfect.
Man, you have the best job ever. You got to watch Toy Story for 24 hours a day by writing Toy Story.
Well, I mean, you're not getting paid a lot to do that. I'm really putting in a lot more hours than I should be if we're doing that unnamed writer's economical table thing. But that's what I believe the people who love it and really want to do it and do good work should. I mean, now that I have seen how everything's made, I would have became an editor. I would have been Stephen Christie #2. That's
one of the things, like, not my favorite person just because of what I see on social media, but because of the way he writes. I'm a huge fan of Donny Cates. And when you read his Thor,
one of the few people I'm reading right now,
consistently, read his Venom, you can absolutely see that he was sitting there as a 10-year-old reading Venom or reading Thor, and he was thinking about these, and it's like the opportunity of a lifetime for him to get to tell these crazy stories on all the Thor and Venom stories that he read in the past, and to finally put them on paper. And I feel like he gets genuine enjoyment by writing.
Yeah. And really on a larger level, like, I mean, because that's the great thing about Donnie, like, energetically to how he's been approaching things. Because, like, I haven't had to read Cosmic Ghost Rider, but I bought a Cosmic Ghost Rider action figure immediately because I was like, yes, I am on board. I know what you're talking about. Like, I'm ready to play with this idea. I get it. I don't need to read it. You good idea, man. Fun.
Mm-hmm.
And the Venom thing, while it's fun, he's turned Eddie Brock from an also ran into a player, into an importance. Somebody who deserves to have his own little universe floating around him, and Eddie and Venom were always just a great visual. Well, that's not true. The original Eddie, as playing off of Spider-Man, was just so great because it was Flash Thompson, but better, worse. He was this big ass bullying photographer who's just an oaf idiot, just like Flash. And then he got given a monster suit. And Spider-Man can't sense when he's around, so he can finally be bullied again. Spider-Man, just snuck up from behind you, gonna rub your face in the toilet. He was such a great villain for Spider-Man on those levels. But then when they went to go take him into, like, his own thing, he became a really great visual. But, it no longer mattered that he was bigger than Spider-Man, no longer mattered that it didn't affect his spider sense. And a lot of stuff would be done with the symbiotes, but it was all kind of limiting and middling, I think. But the ideas, I only got 10% battery left on this, Aaron, so if we can hook me up with a plug.
Oh, yeah.
I have an extension cord in my room. The ideas, that he's put together are really great, and they're big and grand, and I think they'll last.
He got 2 events out of Venom in, like, 24 months. That's insane.
I wish they hadn't milked all the other Venom things previously, because it is hard not to retread that ground. But I've been reading Venom only since, like, issue 25 or whatever, but with my son Cassidy, and he's loved it. For me, it's a great book to read with him as him and a little kid. Like in Venom, and my son loves scary stuff, so I was like, great, we'll read Venom.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's great, and I just read the first issue of Crossover, which was fun as well. I don't find Donnie to be the most elegant writer, but I don't think that's really necessary. I try to sort of do what Donnie does and be a little elegant. But he does a great job just just letting his exuberance fly off the page. And actually, to a certain degree, as I read his stuff, I go, maybe I should relax a little bit. Putting these things together, I'm a little like watching myself like a hawk. You're doing a good job. I do a lot of things, so I it's harder for me to maintain my consistency. But in like every industry that I've ever been in, I've slowly gotten disappointed in how things are done, and largely went independent for a while to try to figure out how to do it on my own because I was just heartbroken. Like Marvel and DC Comics, they're not exactly built to take in good ideas. They are built to hand out ideas, and
they're more of a marketing machine than like an original story machine anymore.
Well, yes, exactly. Well, the marketing department, everybody's got to say, and the ultimate thing is, the story is more likely to be handed to you. How you set yourself up so that the story might be handed to you is kind of like the trick of getting into comics, even though there are many unique ways to do it. That could make you all of a sudden somebody who might have, a pathway in there. But it is relatively rare that some great, brilliant pitch is being kind of taken as is and not being like destroyed. I mean, case in point, every single comic book that I've ever done has been less than I hoped it would be because of things that I couldn't control. Case in point, Dead Romeo, which I did for DC Comics, I created for them. And a very superficial decision that got made there. They're like, oh, let's get D. Snider's cute son to create a vampire romance comic, and maybe we can cash in on this twinkly, glittery vampire garbage. So they had done this event, and I forget what it was called at the time. What was the event where they were in hell, Aaron? They had just done something where they went to Underworld or something, and they were Underworld Unleashed or whatever, and it revealed that there was vampires in hell. So the DO and the higher editor at the time, Ian Sattler, who are great guys, but it's just sort of when you're juggling a million things and so many things, it's like every one of these stories is a baby, and it really needs to be looked over. But a lot of times, especially when you're dealing with the bigger editors who aren't necessarily handling so many day-to-day things, little balls can get dropped. So I pitched them Dead Romeo, and my initial pitch was tied into the DC universe. I'm taking 4 or 5 of my favorite dead DC characters from hell. Jonah Hex, Manchester Black, Lobo, and a couple others. And it was a really cool time. They're coming from the 9 circles of hell, and each one of them was chosen based on what they had done. And Lobo was in the 9th circle of hell, the treacherous bastard, killed his entire race. And it's this awesome pitch where basically Romeo gets a chance to get out of hell, and ultimately he's faced with the same decision that he didn't make the first time, which is to kill this. Like, the reason why he went to hell was because he accidentally killed his love of his life, and then to get out of hell, he's got to kill this other innocent girl. And basically he like spends a few moments with her, and he's like, I can't do this. And when that happens, hell says, oh yeah, and starts sending these 9 sinners, one from each ring of hell, to get him. And they show up all around the planet, wherever it was that they died. And, for some of these characters, it meant something, and this was some cool things. And it was a really cool concept that just had featured a vampire, was revolving around some of that mythology, but was immersed in the DC universe and really just fun and cool. And just, the plan was just make this guy go through fucking hell. He's a vampire. He can heal. He'll get over it. We're gonna just tear this motherfucker to bits, and I'm gonna have fun doing it. With Lobo and Manchester Black, I'm gonna fuck with him until I finish going yee. And I was so excited. And they read this pitch and they went, "We love this. We'd like you to do this as a Lobo pitch in the future." And I was like, okay. They were like, yeah, so we want you to take all of the existing characters from the DC universe out of it. Which, oh no, sorry, that's the first thing they told me. First thing they told me was you can't use any of these characters. So then I had to take Lobo and turn him into this character called the House, and I had to take Manchester Black and turn him into this. I think it's the character that's in the book. This like CIA chick who was like had learned mind control powers or whatever. And like I had to sort of make all these amalgams for the people. And then I handed that in. And then when they saw that, they went, all right, we just want this to be vampires.
You know, the interesting part of the story that you pitched, we want you to remove that and just, you know, concentrate on the flavor of the day. We got a Twilight movie coming out.
Yeah. And then I went, I care about comic books. I read comic books. I would not read this comic book. And that was the real problem. I was just like, you've literally, like, you're making me write something I wouldn't read. Like,
you've
this
extinguished
is boring.
my fire, sir.
Yeah, it's boring. Are there vampires in the DC universe or aren't they? And like, how many fucking the new twist is there from hell? It was just like, it was just such a position I was put in. And then, so I like removed the whole thing. And it's funny, I remember somebody had criticized the first issue of my book. And then somebody else had criticized the end, basically said that I should have revealed the end at the beginning, which they were absolutely right. I should have. But I didn't recognize anymore what my story looked like because I had to do so many things to it. And like, you get to a certain point where you're like, I don't know. Like you just lose track of what it is. And I was excited about the prospect of doing Lobo, but, you know, Dead Romeo became a really, you know, a friend of mine had called it a hyper stylized, cool horror comic, which I appreciated because, you know, as a writer, I like kind of hated it. And actually Ryan Benjamin, the artist, he was never sent the freaking 6-page write-up I did on all of the 12.5 characters that were in the character
descriptions.
12.5 character descriptions, and they weren't given to my artist. I was like, and like, and literally, he drew the Bruce Lee character, but I had a good description of what this guy looked like Bruce Lee, just like straight out of the movie. It's like, this is just so stupid. And, you know, and I couldn't do the different levels of hell things. So I had to get rid of the Dante's Inferno shit, which was like the most fun and interesting because it just gave some structure to this hell shit, which is just, you know, tends to be magic when not done right is just so open-ended. It's hard to like get what's going on and hard for it to not be like a, you know, duox, you know, to solve any problem, you know. But something like Dante's Inferno really gives you a little bit of parameters to work on, and at the very least, it makes you feel like there's some sort of parameters, you know, operating underneath what you're doing. And so then it just became a bunch of vampires, and you know, I did the best that I could, but I think I was really hampered by the character designs in a big way, because if the character designs could have been as unique as they were in my deeper descriptions. And really, you know, I don't think Ryan Benjamin was as invested in that book as he might have been. And that's the thing, too. It's like, you got to go, who loves vampires? Who would really love to do a vampire book? And get me that guy. Don't just freaking grab Ryan Benjamin because he's available right now and put him on freaking Dead Romeo. And he's like, this is my thing. You know, a bunch of white dude vampires. You know, like, and I kind of appreciate that perspective, you know, from Ryan. You know, he and I are buddies. Like, you know, we get along perfectly great. But you know, that creative experience, the root of the problem was it wasn't really the right thing for him. You know, like, you know, like he shouldn't have been on that book. And these things are happening all the time. This is like, this is
the corporate comic book experience was not a pleasant endeavor on your end.
I mean, in some ways it was and is. I mean, you know, it's interesting. I mean, you know, each one of the experiences was its own learning thing about how these things were made. Because as a fan, I read and I used to go, why isn't Will Pfeiffer getting more work? Why hasn't anybody grabbed Mark Andreyko for more stuff? You know, granted, eventually Mark Andreyko, you know, got a little bit more work, you know, as Bendis had a little bit more power. You know, I was just always following creators, and the artists were easier to recognize, you know, for so many of the editors, I guess, and the people in charge. But the writers, so many of them were being squandered. I mean, that freaking Aquaman run, it's like so short that Will Pfeiffer did was incredible. It was so damn good. Keith Champagne, he came in, he did like 2 issues of Green Lantern Corps. And I was like, holy fuck, who's this guy? Amazing. Like, just like ideas flying out of his face. Great dialogue, on point with every character. Everybody sounded like themselves. And he was writing some good complex characters, Guy Gardner and Kyle Rayner. And I've read those guys, you know, deeply enough that I know what they should sound like, you know, and I don't, how come no one else has noticed? And
yeah, it's crazy. I was reading, I'm a big Nightwing fan. I love Dick Grayson.
Yeah.
And Benjamin Percy, he got in for like an abbreviated run on Nightwing. I think he did 2 story arcs, and they were brilliant. I was like, this is awesome. You know, finally Nightwing is where he should be. But then I guess in Tom King's, I think it's Batman 55, Dick Grayson gets shot in the head and gets amnesia. And I guess the editorial staff didn't like Ben Percy's direction on how he was going to use that amnesia. So they removed him from the book. I was like, what? Of course, now he's on Wolverine, you know, kicking butt and taking names on another character.
Yeah, I heard you saying that was good. You know, I honestly, as a fan, if you could, I'll give you my email when we're done. If you could tell me what to avoid. Nightwing is my favorite character. And I have been looking from the outside, and I have not liked the overall direction of things, just like superficially. And, you know, maybe, you know, I love Tim Seeley. He's a sweet dude, good friend of mine. But, like, I don't like some of the ideas that he's having to write. And, like, I don't really want to read them if they're awful. So can you just tell me on the down low, like, what should I read and not read? Because I will totally seek out the Ben Piercy issues. And my son is named Grayson Wayne, and I want to read some, you know, with him. But I've been like, ugh, the amnesia. So all these things, I just feel like at a certain point, these characters just become like rape victims.
I know.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, God damn it. What are you doing to Wally?
Don't even
Wally
talk
West
about
and Dick
Wally
Grayson
West
are
after what happened in
favorite
Future
characters.
Did you see what happened in Future State?
I heard what happened in Future State. I have a pitch. I haven't written it yet, but I've been wanting to for a long time, and hopefully I'll get to do it someday. I want to do the fastest humanitarian alive, and I want Wally to give up being a superhero and dig into saving the world and planting crops and bringing water and helping to make things better, and see what kind of opposition he comes up against when he tries to do that. But I really would love to get my hands on him so that I can bring him back to the person that he represented to me.
It's crazy what they just keep making him a mass murderer, and then Future State he basically pushes Barry Allen like 10 seconds at a time so he gets to watch him kill people for the rest of
I'm literally tearing up right now because I got to the root of what Wally meant to me, and it's making me cry because he's not that anymore.
Well, I'm sorry. It is rough when you invest in a character and then they just.
It's such a bummer. I'm like so sad. He to me he was sort of like stuck in a position where he had a choice to do it like him or really do honor to the thing the best he could, while doing it like him, and that meaning something to him, to honor that legacy, and to that just really meant something to me. And it's like it's sad. It makes me sad.
Absolutely. Yeah,
it makes me really sad because it really fell away from that. And I don't know, I jumped in on a couple Flash issues, and I just think he's got the best rogues gallery in comics, and I've never seen it utilized Right, since I read Jeff Johns stuff, and like I've actually never read Mark Waid's. Well, I've read some of Mark Waid's run, a few graphic novels, but I haven't been able to get my hands on a lot of it. And like the parameters that were set by Johns just like a while back. Like again, I'm like, are you guys not fucking paying attention because you're jealous of him as a writer or some shit? Like fucking read these books. They're good books. They set up fucking great parameters. I mean, the Warden Wolf shit that they set up for Iron Heights was like great shit. And I'm like, everybody's been so fucking lost in Zoom land. I want to vomit. Retreading the same fucking story over and over. Time travel. And it's just so fucking convoluted. And just, Jesus, you got to use that shit with a grain of salt. Not have it be everything. And it's everything. And meanwhile, all of this great shit is being left on the cutting room floor. I'm just like, use them as fucking Batman villains already. You know, if just everything's gonna be Batman, just don't let all of these great characters go to waste because it's just a cesspool. And I don't think Barry Allen's a particularly interesting character. And I just want him gone, and I want fucking Wally doing his thing.
The most interesting thing Barry ever did was die.
Yes, the most interesting thing Barry Allen did was die because it gave Wally something to fucking a reason to live. Wally's care about Barry dying was it was beautiful. It was so beautiful, and it was such an interesting part of the DC universe that mattered for a long fucking time until it didn't anymore.